Hello everyone. So Michael here with you again, another Monday demo lesson, and we're looking at academic task 1 again. Specifically this week we're deciding which data not to include. So obviously in your first paragraph of task 1 essay you'll be paraphrasing the question, so that has no data in it. The overview has no data in it, so that's your second paragraph of the essay. So what we're looking at today is specifically the details paragraphs, so paragraph 3 and paragraph 4, because those are the only ones in which you need to include data anyway. So just to clear up, that's exactly what we're looking at. So here's your question. I chose a table because students tend to be more overwhelmed by the amount of data in tables than they are in when they look at like a line graph, bar graph, pie chart, that kind of thing. And we're just going to look at how you can use the same strategies to decide on what are the key features, what things do you need to describe, and of course which data to include, which infers which data not to include. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 age groups, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 categories. So quite a lot of data there. And when you consider the two details paragraphs are going to be roughly about 100 words, then it would be absolutely impossible to squeeze that many data points into it, and also unnecessary. It would lead to a low score if you were able to write fast enough to include all of them. That wouldn't help your score. That would bring your score down because it shows that you're unable to actually decide on which data points are significant and which ones are not. I think first of all what we would do is just kind of talk about what would be in the overview to give us an idea of how we would be like grouping our data. When I look at this, what's obvious is that watching TV and videos is the most, not necessarily the most popular, but it's what all age groups spend more leisure time doing. So that activity is the one which has the highest number of hours for all of the 6, 7 different age groups. So that's obviously going to be a big part of the overview, so the main feature. But when you look as well, teens are the ones that spend the most time out of all the age groups watching TV, so that's going to be significant. I think it would be easiest then just to go with which other age groups spend the most time in each category. So we've got people in their 30s socializing with 4 or less people more than any other age group. Teens and people in their 20s are socializing with 4 or more people more than any other age group. Individual exercise, so again we have 2 categories or 2 age groups for this category: people in their 30s, people in their 40s. Group exercise or sport, again we have teens are the highest here, and teens again at cinema. Okay, so those are the points I would include in my overview. So we're not really looking at the data yet, but it just helps me to realize or to focus and to imagine how my details paragraphs are going to be organized. Okay, so my overview would probably be, so even though all age groups spent more of their time watching TV and videos than any other category, it was teens who spent the most or the highest number of hours doing this activity, and they also spent the most time doing group exercise or sport and going to the cinema. Okay, so that would be my first sentence in my overview. Then I think the fact that teens are here again, that would help us to kind of link the first category with the second category. So as well as this, teens are also spending the highest number of hours. Teens are spending the highest number of hours shared with people in their 20s. No, that doesn't fit together properly. So people in their teens are also spending the most time socializing with 4 or more people, and people in their 20s, and this number of hours is shared with people in their 20s. As well as this, people in their 30s and 40s spend the most time doing individual exercise, and people in their 30s are also spending more time socializing with 4 people or less than any other age group. Okay, so that seems a bit long. I think when I'll be writing that, I would condense it down a bit. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on my details paragraph. So you have to mention each of these categories. Sorry, let me just change the color of my pen here. Okay, so what might help you to kind of get an overall idea of what's going on is if you draw like a line through here to give you an idea. So if we're looking at it starting at 1,200, and then straight away it's gone down to a bit more than half of that. Then it's gone down again to 400. From 400 it's going back up a little bit to 500, a little bit more to 600, continues to 700, and then continues on again up to 1,100, so a little bit below that. Okay, so when you look at it that way, obviously like this is very rough. This is a very rough line, but it kind of gives me a visualization. Now in the real test you wouldn't even need to draw this line, but you could just imagine it. The reason I'm drawing it is to just give you a kind of an image or an idea of what's going on in my head at the moment. So when I'm looking at this, what I'm thinking is I'm going to have to include the number for teens, the number for people 70 years of age and older, and I'm going to include the number for people in their 30s because of that spike, because you get that like down, the numbers decrease as age goes up until 30s, and then starts to increase again until people are in their 70s. So that there would be the 3 pieces of data I would include for this category, which means even though I'm going to be referring to it by, like for example, in the category watching TV and videos, teens spent the most number of hours at 1,200, and the number of hours decreased as we go up the age range until it hits 400 hours per year for people in their 30s. After this, it increases. It continues to increase as the age rises, as we go up the age range until it gets to 1,100 hours for people in their 70s and over. So there, I'm only including those 3 points of data, so I'm going to exclude those. So I'm not including any of them. Okay, so obviously this is the highest for the next category. I'm going to have to include that. And for the other ones, don't think it's really that significant that it's kind of like 150 doubles to 300, down a bit to 250, down a bit to 200. I mean, there's nothing really looks massive there. You might, if you wanted to include that 150 is the lowest in this age range, in this category, but you wouldn't necessarily have to. You might want to say that for all the other age groups, it fluctuates between 250 and 150, but the highest one is people in their 30s with 300. So you have options there, but again, you're going to include no more than 3 pieces of data for that category. When you're doing this in the test, it's not going to take this long. I mean, describing it is one thing, but when your brain sees it, it's just going to process it much, much faster. Okay, so you're going to have to include the number 350 anyway as the most. and then you could just say the others are 50 or less, because it's kind of insignificant, you know. So for that one, I would only include 2 figures. That's all that would really be necessary there. Okay, the next one then again, so we're going to include 200 and explain that they belong to the 2 categories, people in their 30s and people in their 40s. Again, there's nothing really significant with the other ones. So it starts at 150, so it's quite low at the start, then down to 100, back up to 200, down to 50, up a bit to 75, and back up to 150 where it started. But really, there's nothing major there. Again, because there's so many data points, you're going to have to start cutting them out. But I would say, at this point, I would just go with the 2 highest. And I would probably add that to the same sentence as this one, because you have less. Oh no, because you're going to group that according to those ones. Yeah, so that'd be enough. Just that one, the 200 there. Okay, group exercise or sport. So obviously the 450 because that's the highest one. Okay, I think what is significant about this one is that it tapers off at age. So it's like starts at 450, down to 350, down to 200, down to 150, down to 50, and then 0 for the last 2. So it's a steady decrease from the very start to the end. So I think it would be more significant to include those zeros as well, and just say that it's decreased from there to there, because that is quite significant, that it continues to decrease as time goes along. And for the last category, okay, so it's similar to the first one. So you got that like starting high, steadily decrease to that age group, and then stays there and increases again. So this time, I go ahead and I'd include those 3 data points. So what have I got in total? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. That's still a lot of data when you consider 150 word essay, but that's realistic because there's so many categories and so many age groups that 14 is fine. But then you see how many have been left out, and it's just based on, is it significant, does it represent anything major happening, and that's kind of what you need to consider. So here we had the spike, the high bit to the low bit to the high bit, so that was why the same one here in cinema, high, down to low, and back up again. Here the steady decrease makes it easy to report, but it's also significant that it becomes less and less common with as the age groups, as you go up through the age groups. Here, just because there's nothing else really to report, there's nothing major happening in the other ones, so that would probably be your last sentence because it's the least significant. Okay, so again, 350 being the highest one, and 50. Don't recall why I said you would include 50, to be honest. Realistically, you might be able to leave that one out as well, so we bring it down to 13. Okay, and then those ones, 150, 300, 250. So again, you're just going to say the highest one, and then you can talk about the range. So that'll be fine as well. Okay. And then I'd write it up. That'll be it. Obviously, like this would all be going on in my head more so than writing it out. There's no way you could spend this much time making notes on your graph, but you could just kind of try to imagine it as a line graph to help you figure out what the key features are and what way you're going to choose which data to include and which data not to include. Right, so next I want you to do the exact same thing for me. This is a question I got a while back from a student. They requested that I make a lesson with it, but I didn't have the opportunity to do it until now. So thank you for sending it to me, and finally I got to it. So all I want from you guys is just to write the details paragraphs for this question. When you're practicing, it's probably best to at least write the overview of the 2 details paragraphs, but just post the 2 details paragraphs in the comments under the video so that I can see which data you included and which data that you left out, and just then we can see if everyone's doing the same thing or for what reasons they've chosen the data that they've included. Okay, thank you all. Bye bye now.